Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a fascinating argument that fully accepts evolution, but asks a really provocative question. Doesn't explain everything about us? We're going to explore what seems to be a major, visible gap in our own evolutionary story.
Now let's be super clear. This is not about debating whether evolution is real. Its mechanisms are well established. The real question is whether it's a complete explanation for what makes us uniquely human, especially when it comes to our incredible capacity for symbolic culture. So let's break down how we're going to tackle that.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll start by reframing the question, getting away from the usual debates. Then we'll establish a kind of universal rule in nature. After that, we'll see how humans seem to just break that rule. We'll also tackle the major counterarguments, and we'll wrap up with what this potential gap in our understanding really means.
Okay, so first up, we're not here to challenge evolution itself. Instead, we're zooming in on a really specific and pretty persistent puzzle within it, the origin of the unique, symbol-based culture that truly defines humanity.
The core of this whole argument really rests on a simple, observable pattern in how evolution works across the entire animal kingdom, a pattern so consistent, we could almost call it an iron law of evolution.
So what's this iron law all about?
Well, it's a concept called behavioral template preservation. Think of it like this. It's an organism's core behavioral software. The idea is that even when evolution dramatically changes an animal's physical hardware, its body, that core software stays surprisingly consistent.
Dogs are a perfect example. After 15,000 years of breeding, a Great Dane and a Chihuahua look nothing alike, right? And yet, they both still operate on the wolf's behavioral template. They form social hierarchies, they mark their territory, and they play in ways that are just a clear echo of their wild ancestors.
And it's the exact same thing with your house cat. When it's chasing a laser pointer or pouncing on a toy, that's just a miniaturized version of a lion stalking prey on the savannah. It's all a direct echo of its much larger wild relatives. The pattern is totally preserved.
And look, this isn't just a couple of cherry-picked examples. We see this pattern of behavioral continuity everywhere. Whales went back to the sea, but they still give live birth and nurse their young just like land mammals. Birds developed flight, but they still have nesting behaviors that are clearly reptilian. This rule seems to hold true everywhere, with one really glaring exception.
Okay, so if this rule of behavioral preservation is as solid as it seems, then you'd expect human culture to just be, a souped-up version of ape behavior, right? But that's not what we find. Not at all.
Instead of seeing that continuity, we see a complete break, a massive divide. It's like there's this giant canyon between us and our closest relatives. Human culture doesn't just add a new layer of complexity, it operates on totally different principles. We went from basic dominance hierarchies to abstract concepts of justice and rights, from simple signals to a language that can discuss things that don't even exist.
And when you break it down like this, you can really see it. Across every single one of these domains, the difference isn't just a matter of degree. It's not like a wolf's howl getting a little more refined and turning into a dog's bark. It's a fundamental change in kind. Ape's social order is all about dominance. Human society is built on normative rules, on ideas of what we ought to do.
And that's why many describe this difference as structural, not incremental. It's not just an upgrade to the existing system. It's like our entire species started running on a completely new operating system, one that's capable of symbolic thought, abstract morality, and building knowledge over generations.
Okay, but any good argument is going to have some pushback, right? It should. So in the spirit of getting the full picture, let's walk through the three most common responses to this whole idea of a human discontinuity.
So these are the big ones you'll hear. First, the idea that apes do have culture. Second, that our culture is just an emergent property that kind of popped into existence when our brains got big enough. And third, the accusation that this is all just a religious argument in disguise.
All right, first up, the ape culture objection. Now this one usually comes down to a mix-up in definitions. A chimp learning to use a stick to get termites, that's socially learned behavior, for sure. But it's not symbolic culture. It's not a system of meaning, like mathematics or legal code. The argument here is that we're talking about two totally different things.
Okay, what about the second one? The idea that our unique culture just emerged when our brains hit a certain size. Well, the problem is, that's often just a label, not an explanation. It doesn't tell us how physical brain processes actually produce abstract meaning, or moral oughts, or symbolic thought. It's like describing that a car started moving without ever explaining the engine inside.
And finally,
There's the big one, the accusation that this is just creationism sneaking in the back door. But if you look at how the argument is actually built, it's all based on an observable pattern in nature. It's simply identifying a puzzle by comparing patterns. It doesn't start with, and it certainly doesn't require, a theological conclusion to make its point.
So, if this discontinuity is a real observable pattern, and the common objections don't quite resolve it, where exactly does that leave us in our understanding of ourselves?
And this quote, I think, really sums up the spirit of the whole thing. The point isn't to have all the answers. The point is that being honest about what our current theories don't yet fully explain, well, that is the most scientific position you can take. It's about keeping the inquiry open, not shutting it down with a false sense of certainty.
So let's boil this all down. The core takeaway is this. Evolution seems to have a pretty consistent rule about preserving behavioral templates. Humans appear to be the lone exception to that rule. And that discontinuity creates a genuine explanatory gap in the standard theory. The key here is that acknowledging this gap isn't being anti-science. It's the very process that drives science forward.
So, at the end of the day, this argument doesn't hand us a neat answer. Instead, it leaves us with a really profound, maybe even a little uncomfortable question. If we really are the exception to one of evolution's most consistent rules, what is the full story of our origins, and what does it really mean to be human?